when the recession took hold, so you go back to the crash of 2007, companies, probably sensibly, the finance people in companies, their voices became elevated, often moving from finance controller or chief finance officer into CEO a lot of the time, because cash flow kills, right? You get that wrong, the business dies. So having somebody who understands the numbers and can navigate you through these tricky times was a really sensible decision. But finance people like to see A plus B equals C a lot of the time in my experience, and they want to see, well, if we're going to spend this, what do we get back from it? And everything has to be done within the time frame of the quarterly reports, the monthly reports, the daily reports, the annual reports, and anything that doesn't fall into that regulation of this is what we do is often seen as a failure. Now, brand building will never be seen as a success if you only measure it on a quarterly basis. It's almost impossible to, brand building is a medium to long-term play. It's a multi-year play that you really need to invest in, because the power of your brand is why, in the obvious example, Starbucks will sell you a coffee for £3.50 because it says Starbucks on it. It doesn't cost them any more to make than the little guy around the corner who's selling it at £1.50. But because they put their logo on the side, they put their brand on it, they can sell it for more. Why? Because that's the value of their brand. But you don't get that in a quarterly spreadsheet. It's hard to quantify, it's difficult to measure. And it looks even more difficult when you can sit down in front of Facebook, Google, wherever, and go, there's a load of stats to look at. So people think that because we've got a number next to it, then that it's true. And it's not. Data's facts, but it's not the truth. There's a difference between the two. So people can spew out a lot of data from digital campaigns. You've got TV companies now are changing how they measure and are throwing a lot of data at people, and everyone's going, we've got this data, throwing it. But actually, all it's doing is measuring that short-term sales cycle. So you've really got to look and focus on long-term brand investment. There was a piece of research done by, I think it's Binet and Fields, looking at where you should measure between brand investment and sales investment. I think it was a 40-60 split on brand at 40 and sales at 60, and sort of short-term activity at 60. I'm not saying we should just all be saying, marketing is just about long-term brand investment. But I think the companies that do it well understand they have to invest in brand because it helps over the longer term. It helps open in B2B sales. People know of you when they lift the phone, when they open the door, they've heard of you, they know what you're about. You break down barriers before people even get there. And it's only when it's not there do you realise that brand, you should have been investing in it. So I think to an extent as well, it helps to, if you look at it and you talk about the sales funnel, brand being top of the funnel, just awareness. And because it sounds a little bit airy-fairy, it's like, well, how do you put awareness in a spreadsheet? It's difficult to measure, it can be expensive to measure to do it properly, so it's not really done. So anything that's brand awareness feels like an investment into just the ether, really. Whereas, well, we spend this and we deliver that. I mean, there's a whole strand of marketing now, performance marketing, who'll just focus on bottom of funnel conversions and will say, well, you spend 1 with us and we'll give you 12 back. That's a really compelling proposition. I'd spend 10 with them then. I wouldn't just spend 1, I'd spend 10 because I get 120 back. Well, if I give you 100, I get, geez, this is great. But what you're doing there is you're just really pushing and pushing and pushing. And what you'll start to see, almost everyone I've spoken to is really invested in performance marketing. So whether Facebook ads, Google ads, or even sort of real targeted SEO, what they all tell you after a little while, our cost per acquisition started to creep up. Starting to run up, and well, we've changed this and we've changed that. We can't quite get it back down, but so they just reset the normal line. Oh well, but it's still profitable. It's still all right. It's still profitable. What brand building activity are you doing? Nothing. We're investing everything in that, right? So your business is now a hostage to the fact that your cost per acquisition is rising. To your business is now a hostage to a change in a Google algorithm. You go to SEO conferences and there's always someone there going, our business lost half of its traffic because Google changed its algorithm. Yeah, well, that's because your business is a hostage to them now. Your business is a hostage to Google putting its prices up, to Facebook putting its prices up, to somebody coming in with more money. If you invest in brand, you insulate yourself from that. Not entirely, but you insulate yourself from that a lot. If people are searching for your brand name, the cost of that in the Google auction, the Facebook auction goes down. Why are they going to search for your brand name? Because you've invested in brand marketing. And if you're just doing bottom of the funnel activity, you are, to me, you're that business where you get all your trade in the 2 days before Christmas, and that keeps you going for the rest of the year. You know, in the old-fashioned business world where you sell everything in December and then hope for the best and keep it ticking over. That's what you're doing. You're putting all your eggs into the Google or the Facebook or the Twitter basket. And as soon as they start changing something, because let me tell you, they're not worried. You know, they're generating billions and billions each month and each year in revenue from ads. So they're going to tweak their algorithms to make more money for them. That's how they do it. That's what they seem to do every time. So I'd always say brand building has to be part of any good marketing.
And are we seeing a shift towards a greater appreciation of that? And I mean, you know, the phrases creep into the language over periods of time, and you know, last click attribution is something that if you'd said to somebody, most 99% of people, even 3 or 4 years ago, if you'd said what does last click attribution mean, most people would have been scared to say that they didn't know what it was, but actually don't know what it is. Is the fact that now there are more conversations going on around the dangers of that last click attribution model, because the spreadsheet says it was that direct traffic from the website that got us that conversion, so we invest all our money in our own website, never mind in all the other touch points along the journey that got there. Are we seeing that because those conversations are starting to happen, that there is a greater awareness now of making sure success is attributed appropriately throughout the different funnel stages, do you think?
I think, yes, slowly it's creeping that way. I think there's almost sort of a separate problem that we, as marketers, people decide on the answer to the question before really asking the question. So they've decided Facebook is the answer before really asking the strategic questions. But parking that for a minute, they are then looking at how do they attribute, where are those sales coming from? It comes with experience. I think some of the better marketers and the older marketers do start to see that actually we need to start looking with a wider model to understand where people are coming from. I genuinely think, though, that part of the issue we have as an industry, as a marketing industry, is that that's not taught at any great level. So I have a master's in marketing, an MSc, and looking at the skills that you would need to be able to measure and understand where those things come from, and sort of data analysis and that sort of kind of wider even sort of view that an economist might have or a data scientist might have. I'm not suggesting that you have to be a data scientist to be in marketing, but I think an appreciation of it. You know, we were taught during the MSc to have an appreciation of what design is and good design. Now, it doesn't mean I need to be a designer, but you have a bit of an appreciation of it. That data science set, that economist sort of skills isn't really taught, as I understand it, in a lot of marketing classes at universities. And where then, if you are interpreting data incorrectly, your decision making is going to be bad. And so, you know, when you talk to companies, when you look at bigger companies, they'll have data science teams or MI teams and things like that, and they're the ones who are bringing the proper research into the room to help people make those decisions. Now, as you get away from sort of huge companies and, you know, large companies with thousands of employees that can afford those departments, they disappear really quickly. So the question is, how are we going to bring that thinking into the rooms for medium-sized companies? You know, companies of 300-400 people don't have a data science team. They don't have an MI team. They're getting reports pulled by marketing people or by an agency, and the agencies don't have those skills either. So they're having reports pulled of information that looks usually quite favourable, being sent to the board, who are then trying to make decisions with incomplete information.
It supports a pre-existing view of the world.
Yes, yeah. Now, you know, there is a point that you have to accept you will never have complete information. And I don't think that the data people quite understand that. They seem to think we can measure everything so you can see everything. You can't. Information is never complete, but I think that's what we get from marketing and agencies is data that supports how well they've done instead of data that helps you decide on what you're going to do, which is a slightly different way of looking at it. And I think that's probably a big change we need to see, which will start by teaching more about data in marketing courses.